Thanks for your patience. It looks like we're really close.
Thank you, Tanya and Brian. Doing great.
Okay, it looks like things are running smoothly, I think.
You're ready?
We're ready to go.
Okay. Thank you, everyone, for being here this morning. Call the meeting to order for this special session of the South Lane School District. And apologize for the day this morning. There's much to consider and discuss today. Today, in this special session, we'll be hearing testimony from staff that are potentially or that are identified in the consent agenda under dismissal actions. And then because we were not able to fully get through the discussion in the executive session earlier, we adjourned to executive session to consider the information provided to us by the staff this morning. And then we'll reconvene this session before we close the meeting. Questions or comments from the board before we start with testimony?
And Dustin, you sound like a computer. It's hard to hear you. It's intermittent. I'm wondering if you turn your video off, if the sound would be better. Oops, we lost him.
Okay. Apologize for the delay. Tanya, can you admit Samantha Beach into the meeting? Those providing testimony will have 10 minutes. Brian will support us with in terms of keeping track of time and giving a hand wave heads up as you get close to the end of that 10-minute testimony period. Thanks, Brian.
Brian, let's give him a 1-minute warning.
Not seeing Samantha yet.
Tanya, are you letting him?
Can you let them in, Brian?
I can. I don't see. I saw Samantha earlier. I don't see her on the attendees list at this point. Samantha, if you're in the room, could you please raise your hand? Thank you. There you are.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
We can hear
Yes.
you, Samantha.
Perfect. Am I good to start?
Your floor is yours.
Okay. Hello, my name is Sam Beach, and this is my 5th year as a 2nd grade teacher in South Lane School District. I'm here today to speak to you about the district's decisions surrounding the governor's vaccine mandate. The board will be voting today on my termination. I would like to make it clear that I was not recommended to you for termination because I refused to comply with the governor's mandate, but instead because I could not in good conscience comply with the requirements that were being forced on me from this district after my exception was approved. OAR 333-019-1030 stipulates that school staff have to be vaccinated against COVID-19 or have a documented medical or religious exception. I had my exception accepted by the district office on September 10th. Therefore, I should have been in compliance with what was required of me by law. Imagine my surprise when the district added its own mandate in the form of a list of 8 additional requirements solely for staff with approved exceptions. This document was described as a list of accommodations for safety. The accommodations were actually a list of rules that may look benign on the surface, but they are leading this district into a culture of discrimination and shaming. The very first expectation on the list states the signee must wear a KN95 mask, completely covering nose and mouth at all times and in all locations. I immediately had grave concerns over the visibility of this requirement that would make vaccination status clear to anyone who knew of this rule, as there aren't a lot of staff members who regularly wear KN95 masks. How might someone know of this rule? Any staff member, community member, or parent would, because the contents of the additional expectations for unvaccinated staff were made public at a recent board meeting. This opens the doors for discrimination against those who are now forced to wear a special mask, which clearly marks them as unvaccinated and subjects them to harassment by students, staff, and parents. This rule is a clear violation of medical privacy. I'd also like the board to consider the third expectation on the list that prohibits the signee from removing their mask to eat or drink with others in the room. This expectation is dangerously close to segregation and is a barrier to proper hydration and nourishment throughout the workday without isolation, which is almost impossible in a school environment without leaving campus. The culture that this document shapes demoralizes the very individuals who are working so hard to stay and serve the kids they love. Many of these things I am describing are already happening in this district. Those people who chose to stay with an approved exception and sign this district-created document that is not required by the state are the people I'm speaking up for today. I ask that this document be removed immediately by the superintendent, who has full discretion to do so, and consider it void for anyone who chose to sign. I chose not to sign this document because I believe it is pushing us down a dangerous path of segregation, harassment, and violation of protected medical and religious rights. School Board Policy AC entitled Non-Discrimination is already a board-approved policy that speaks exactly to my comments today. Please continue to make decisions that support equity, inclusion, and community. I have given a copy of this statement to the board secretary for your further review at your discretion. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Samantha. Next will be Peter Bowers. Peter, we can see you. You're currently muted. There we go. Peter, the floor is yours.
Before I begin, you should know, no matter what reason is given for holding this meeting at 8:45 a.m. on a work day, and yes, I am missing work to be here, it's only going to look like you're trying to duck public scrutiny. That's not a very good look. Cutting off my access to my district email while I'm still an employee of the district doesn't send a positive message either. So now let's get to the heart of this matter. We shouldn't be where we are today, and we didn't need to get here. We are not here because of this mandate. We are here because of the unreasonable expectations foisted upon us by the superintendent. wearing a mask all day, except for a sip of water now and then, not being allowed to eat at social gatherings, i.e. lunch or other events with food, because we couldn't unmask, and being required to wear a specific type of mask that no one else is required to wear. These things are all discrimination and contribute to a hostile work environment. According to Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, my employer cannot discriminate against me by requiring additional restrictions on me based on medical or religious grounds. In so doing, the employer is putting qualifications on my right to hold and live by my religious beliefs. Furthermore, the superintendent, once she had agreed to amend the conditions of weekly testing and then retracted that agreement, has no problem with us using a test swab containing a substance known to cause cancer. Or there is an alternative requiring a weekly drive to Eugene for the saliva version of the test. Among my objections to these tests, other than the possible cancer, of course, is this: the results are not timely, thus they do no good. The third of the three most egregious of these additional restrictions, modified slightly from its original form, is basically a way of saying the district may impose further restrictions in the future if the district deems they are necessary. So in addition to being expected to comply with restrictions given to the few people who are not vaccinated because of a sincerely held religious belief, and to no one else, I was also being asked to agree beforehand to more possible and unknown restrictions. That is not reasonable. These unreasonable expectations haven't just affected those of us recommended to you for dismissal. There are many others who felt intimidated or coerced into either getting shots they didn't want or signing an expectations form they didn't agree with in order to keep their jobs. As it turns out, holding one's job over their head is a powerful motivator towards compliance. It sounds like sanctioned extortion, if you ask me. The beginning of the school year started very well. I was connecting with students, I was differentiating, I was managing the classroom. The students and I were finding our groove. I was doing all of that despite the fact that I had the stress and anxiety of feeling harassed and discriminated against at the same time. So to be ripped from my classroom was incredibly heartbreaking for me. I actually had parents message me that their child was crying. I don't think that this decision is best for students. In a world that's full of big, scary adult issues, kids need a consistent place to feel safe and cared for. I was that place. Now they're in a place of uncertainty. This is not what I would consider putting children first. But I imagine some of you thinking, this must be done in order to keep everyone safe. I am not that big a menace to public health and hygiene. I submit that my more than 8 months in the classroom without incident are evidence of that. And according to the preamble of the mandate itself, regardless of vaccination status, even vaccine breakthrough cases may transmit this variant effectively. If this is the case, how am I any more a threat to public health than a vaccinated person? In closing, I want to urge you to think about this. You actually have a choice today. In a little while, you are going to vote on our dismissal. I'm guessing you have been told that you must vote to dismiss us in order to keep the district in compliance with the mandate. In that case, you can side with discrimination against and the vilification of a group of people regarded as dirty or second class because of their religious beliefs and subsequent decision to remain unvaccinated. But that's not the only thing you can do to keep the district in compliance. You can vote to remove the unreasonable expectations placed on us, those here before you today, and those who signed because they felt they had no choice, and let this district move forward as a place where children actually do come first. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Next is Kimberly Green. Go. Kimberly, we can see you and you're unmuted. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. Here today to discuss the fact that you guys are going to vote on whether to terminate me based on 2 grounds that I received in a 15-page letter sent to me via certified mail. I have been a teacher for over 17 years. This year, I took on PTC president for London School. I also have 4 children in South Lane School District. The last 5 years, I have taught at London School as a special education teacher for K-8 and the reading specialist as well. When last year started, things changed from day to day. Staff were told they had the option of working from home, but this was not an option for me. Not only did I not have the bandwidth, I was required by my admin at that time to work from the building to serve the SPED kids in Lippy groups. I went in at the height of the pandemic in person with my students every day. I followed the guidelines with sanitation and using my air purifier that kills the COVID virus within seconds. We wore our masks, we socially distanced, and I followed every protocol, and there were no incidents of transmission. I was also, as most of us, unvaccinated. The 2 grounds that are noted on our letter were insubordination and neglect of duty. I take issue with both of these terms. For insubordination, it is stated that I was directed to comply with an approved medical or religious exception, and that at no point did I express confusion about the mandate requirements. Both of these statements are false, as I extensively outlined in my letter to the board that I submitted this weekend. I continually asked for clarification via email on aspects of the mandate and the expectations document. I brought up concerns with the KN95 mask being worn all day. I tried it. Not only is it not recommended by OSHA for more than 2 hours, it is not possible to teach and talk continuously with a restrictive mask for 6 hours or more a day, with only one 15-minute break and a lunch break. Additionally, trying to teach kids speech to text sound patterns in order to read better with a KN95 mask is ludicrous, and it doesn't serve students in special education or actually in any capacity. The in-house testing was acceptable until it was retracted by Superintendent Curtis to be replaced by 2 different options. Both of these options return results in 5 to 7 days' time in which I could potentially be infected and infecting both staff and students. This is clearly not a safety measure, as was stated. Both tests require me to release private medical information and to allow for my DNA to be used for research, which also serves no purpose in safety. While there are 2 options, the U of O option creates an undue hardship on myself and my family of 7. Logistically driving to Eugene every week with 5 kids in tow to be tested is not a possibility. In the area of neglect of duty, there are 4 rules cited. GBEB, communicable diseases, comply with all measures adopted by the district and the OHA. Considering I have followed all protocols in the Ready Schools for the last 2 years and filled out the OHA exception form, that is all that was required from them. I have fulfilled this as well. In regards to OAR 333-019-10303, documentation of a religious exception, I have completed that and turned that in immediately. OAR 333-019-10304, submit a vaccination card or documentation of a religious exception. I clearly submitted that as well. OAR 584-020-00353, maintain the dignity of the profession by respecting and obeying the law, exemplifying personal integrity and honesty. I have broken no laws in this process. I have been honest and true the entire time, upholding my integrity, as well as my religious convictions. I have complied with each of them. As a matter of fact, my record shows that I have gone above and beyond my duties the last 2 years of COVID, the opposite of neglect. I had every intention of signing. I want that clear. If the expectation and accommodations were reasonable, but they weren't, not for all of us. That document was changed so many times, and exceptions were made for some and not others. Some people had some things removed and initialed, and others were not given those same allowances. It was apparent this wasn't about equity and retaining highly qualified teachers. Additionally, nowhere in the law does it state that in order to fulfill the religious exception, which I did an expectations document also need to be signed and accompany that? There is nothing in regards to this. Those were hand-picked accommodations by the district. Other districts respected the differences and beliefs and made a conscious decision to accept the religious or medical exception and uphold the current guidelines already outlined by OD and not impose additional discriminatory, inequitable, and segregatory accommodations. It could be very simple. You could remove this document and we could move on. I strongly encourage the board to look hard at who our leadership is and how we have handled this. To lead through fear, coercion, and lies will not only continue to weaken our district, but there is no equity in this stance. There is only division. Thank you.
Thank you, Kimberly. Next, I have Jill Hermanson. Jill, we can see you and you're unmuted. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning. The last time I addressed the board was several years ago when I was asking for your approval to take a group of 7th and 8th graders from London School on a citizenship trip to Washington, D.C. I thank you for trusting me to make that trip possible. It was a life-changing event for those 10 students. Sadly, due to COVID, we haven't been able to take another group of students, but 10 cents at a time through generous donations of redeemable cans and bottles, we already have $5,000 saved for the next trip. 80% of those donations I have driven to Bottle Drop in Eugene or Springfield, in my own car, with my own gas, on my own time, in hopes that funding will be there when London students can make that trip again. For the last 6 years, I have also been parent club president at London School, even the year after my daughter had moved to the high school because I couldn't get another parent to take over, because I felt a parent club is important for parents and staff to support students at London School. For the last 25 years, 16 with this district, I have put children first, not only in my professional life, but in my personal life as well. Last year, while district students received only 30% at 2 hours a day, 4 days a week of teacher instruction time, my students received 100% of the minutes on their IEPs of speech and language therapy every week, all school year. From October till June, I provided in-person speech services for students who did not have adequate internet or home support to access services online. I came into the building every day while most teachers worked from home. Every Wellness Wednesday, I was also in the school building providing speech services to homeschool students who were also on my caseload so I could maintain cohorts. I followed strict sanitizing and distancing and safety COVID measures, and my students and I stayed well. Why am I here telling you all these things? Because I am up for termination today due to the governor's COVID vaccine mandate, and my fate is in your hands. The effects of this mandate have been life-changing for me. For 16 years, my identity has been centered around being a speech therapist for South Lane School District. It's what I do. It's what I am. I feel saddened while you trusted me to take 13 and 14-year-olds to Washington, D.C. and work in person all last school year, you no longer trust me to keep staff and students safe from COVID. I did apply for religious exception and was granted one, and told my exception was accepted, only to find out it was conditional based on my signature agreeing to expectations that I did not feel were equitable or that I could work under all day, 5 days a week for the entire school year. The weekly COVID test that gets mailed out and the results are received 7 days later while I have been with staff and students during that time does nothing to keep them safe. Another expectation was wearing a K95 mask at all times. I'm a speech therapist. Not having a way for students to see my mouth is like asking a construction worker to do their job with one hand tied behind their back. How could I possibly do much good for students? I was willing to try, though, which brings me to the subject of equity. I am saddened by the leadership and the legal counsel of this district that more effort was not put into finding accommodations to keep valuable employees. Not a single person from South Lane School District contacted me to say, Jill, I don't agree with your beliefs on the COVID vaccine, but I value you as a person and as an employee of South Lane School District. Let's work together to put a plan in place so that you can continue serving students under this mandate. Instead, an expectation document was drafted and a line was drawn in the sand. Sign the document as written or be terminated. This stance is the opposite of equity. I have worked in special education for 25 years, and equity is not a blanket set of expectations. That will never make things equitable for a student or an employee who needs accommodations. My religious beliefs or my beliefs about the vaccine may not coincide with your beliefs, but in equity, this doesn't matter. You don't have to agree with the beliefs of the transgendered person or the beliefs of the immigrant, but equity means you treat them with decency and respect and put all things in place that they need so that they can belong to the whole without being considered the other. Equity is about humans supporting humans with humanity. And I feel South Lane School District has not supported this human. So please stop professing you believe in equity. You are not working to a culture of acceptance and equity. You are simply choosing communities to support while being discriminatory towards others, like those who are unvaccinated due to strongly held religious beliefs, to which this vaccine is contrary. The following statement was taken from a superintendent's update to staff. After this pandemic is behind us and all issues that came with it threatened to divide us, COVID-19, quarantines, and mandates, we can all say that we made every effort to become an inclusive culture. Looking back, we can say we resisted behaviors and ways of being that could have divided us and instead developed ways of being and reaching out to one another that have made our entire South Lane School District team more caring, inclusive, and collaborative of and with one another across differences. These are lovely, meaningless words, or at least not words that apply to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Next, I have Lydia Shipley. Lydia, I can see you and it looks like you're unmuted. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm not going to rehash all of the improprieties that have been committed or subject you all to how difficult this process has been for those of us on the chopping block today, those who were coerced to sign early, and those who relented and received a shot they did not want in order to maintain their livelihood. You, as the board of directors, are in a unique position to process what you have heard today and make decisions as to the direction moving forward for South Lane School District staff and students. Since the start of the pandemic, South Lane has been administering all policies and actions under the guise of what's best for kids. I cannot reconcile how letting go of 6 highly qualified educators with years of experience in the wake of such educational loss due to the pandemic would qualify as what's best for kids. That causing enormous emotional stress on teachers who have been in the trenches, so to speak, for the past 18 months is what's best for kids. That subjecting them to the isolation and vulnerability that is inherent when taking a stand for your medical privacy is what's best for kids. That replacing invested educators with inexperienced, unqualified, and ill-equipped substitute instructors whose only requirement was to maintain a pulse and not be a convicted criminal is what's best for kids. I'm sure the remaining staff appreciated the additional workload incurred when bringing in such replacements and the strain of trying to secure a substitute for their own personal needs when the pool is so limited to begin with. But as I said, it's what's best for kids. What would have been best for kids is to provide a religious exemption for teachers that didn't subject them to built-in discrimination that would do nothing but isolate them from their peers, identify them as unvaxxed by their excessive PPE, and leave a blank check on the table for additional restrictions as the administration sees fit. I would have much preferred to spend my back to school time resuming the business of educating, building healthy relationships with my students, and providing parents with the comfort of knowing that their child is my #1 concern. I would have preferred to start the year with a handful of baby chicks in my classroom for my students to raise and care for while we learned about their anatomy and how they interact with each other and how an egg's made. I would have enjoyed bringing my pug Lola to school as I have for the last 4 years for my students to play with, read to, and take for walks when they're frustrated or having an emotional moment. I would have relished the opportunity to get to know my 7 legacy students who were so excited to finally be in my classroom. What's best for kids is to be continued to be educated by community-minded professionals who are invested and dedicated to the children of Cottage Grove. I keep coming back to the fact that this did not have to be this hard. To be honest, I would have made a few accommodations had my principal asked it of me. I know there are parents who are afraid and are concerned for their child safely, and rightly so. If my testing once a week eased their worries, I would have done it without a contract, whether I agreed or disagreed with their logic. Instead, Superintendent Curtis decided to shackle exception seekers with a laundry list of expectation, violate their staff confidentiality by outing involved staff in a bulk email, and then followed it up with a lame apology while projecting responsibility elsewhere, hampered the process by failing to maintain an open line of communication and transparency, and finally, privately negotiated changes to expectations only to reverse them all later. Her behavior was bizarre and created a mountain of distrust that has gotten us to where we are today. There are many districts across our state that accepted all expectations and required minimal to no expectations on their unvaccinated staff. And those quality staff members were able to get back to the business of educating. As a staff member to this district for the past 15 years, I've had very little reason to deal with the district office or the superintendent. But this year, the staff, the students, the parents, and the community members as a whole are looking to this administration, led by the superintendent, for leadership past the pandemic. And I'm afraid they are going to have to keep looking unless you, the board of directors, intervene and do what is truly best for kids and right this wrong. Thank you, board members, for your time and consideration with regard to this matter.
Thank you, Lydia. Okay, so now the board will convene an executive session Executive session is called under provision of ORS 192.660, Part 2, Section B, to consider the dismissal or disciplining of or hearing complaints or charges brought against a public officer, employee, staff member, or agent. We will, Tanya or Brian, will we keep this open or open it back up at a specific time?
Can't do two meetings at once, so you'll have to open it back up at a specific time, correct, Tanya?
Yeah, that's correct. I'd hate to try to do two and then we'd lose them both. So if we could give a time frame that we could join back.
So why don't we say 10 o'clock? Just looking around at board members. No, Gary?
I have a hard fast at 10 that I can't break. And that was, when I was asked for this time, that was part of my response to be here.
9:50? Okay,
Why are we allowing so much time before we get in? Are we going straight to executive session?
we're going to go to executive session and then come back to the consent agenda.
Thank you.
Okay, so 9:50.
So we'll close this session just for the public. Sorry, for the public to know, we'll close this session and we'll be returning at 9:50.
To the same, yes, to the same link.
Same link.
Information. Thank you.
So we're leaving this link and then coming back to the link that you have on our email.
Consent agenda for the board to consider. Do I have a motion? Somebody will have to unmute to motion.
I move that we agree to the consent agenda.
Do I have a second? Gary is seconded. Okay. I think we can see everybody and hear most of us. All those in favor signify by saying aye, showing your thumb.
Aye.
Sherry, I can't see. Aye. Let the record reflect that 6 ayes. All those opposed? Mr. Settelmeyer? Consent agenda is approved. I want to thank everybody for their time and testimony today. I know that this is one of the hardest days for us as a board and for the staff members that are affected. I appreciate everything and the work that it's taken to get us here, and it is a sad day. That will close this special session. Thank you for your time today, folks. Have a good day.